My name is Jensen Mitchell, 27 years old, living with a heart condition that requires daily medication to keep me alive. I never thought my own sister Madison would betray me so deeply by switching my pills as a joke. When I collapsed during my presentation, my parents rushed to the hospital not to support me but to beg me to protect her. The toxicology report revealed something far worse than a prank. Before I dive into how my own sister nearly killed me, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to follow this story to its shocking conclusion. Growing up with long QT syndrome meant I was always the fragile kid in the family. My condition causes irregular heartbeats that can trigger sudden fainting spells or seizures, and in the worst cases, sudden death. From age 6, I've taken medication twice daily to regulate my heart rhythm. Missing even a single dose could send me to the emergency room, a fact my entire family understood clearly. My morning routine was built around my medication. Wake up, take the first pill with breakfast, set an alarm for the evening dose, and always carry emergency backup pills. My doctor had recently switched me to a new medication that was working incredibly well. For the first time in years, I felt almost normal, with more energy and fewer side effects. The new pills were slightly larger than my old ones and had a distinctive blue coating, making them easy to identify. Despite my condition, I managed to build a successful career as a financial analyst. I worked remotely most days, but important presentations required in-person meetings. I was careful, methodical, and never took risks with my health. That's how I survived for 27 years, with a condition that takes many before they reach adulthood. My parents, Robert and Catherine Mitchell, were protective but encouraging throughout my childhood. They pushed me to live as normally as possible while respecting my limitations. My younger sister Madison, however, had a different perspective on my condition. Just 3 years younger than me, she grew up in the shadow of a brother who required extra attention due to health concerns. Madison developed a peculiar sense of humor early on. Her jokes often crossed the line between funny and cruel. When we were kids, she once hid my backup medication during a family vacation, causing a full-scale panic until she revealed where she'd put it. My parents grounded her for a week, but their discipline never seemed to stick. "She's just being a kid," my dad would say. "She doesn't understand the severity." But Madison wasn't a kid anymore, and as we grew older, her pranks became more sophisticated and malicious. By the time I reached my mid-20s, the dynamic in our family had shifted. I had secured a good job with Lincoln Financial Group, bought my own condo, and was building a stable life despite my health challenges. Madison, meanwhile, bounced between jobs, accumulated debt, and frequently moved back home with our parents. Each time they welcomed her with open arms and open wallets. The resentment built slowly. I noticed it in the comments she would make during family dinners. "Must be nice to have everyone worry about you all the time," or "Jensen gets all the attention because of his heart. But what about my problems?" My parents would quickly change the subject, avoiding conflict at all costs. What I didn't know then was that Madison's problems were far more serious than occasional unemployment. She had developed a gambling habit that drained her bank account and maxed out multiple credit cards. She borrowed money from friends until no one would lend to her anymore. Our parents helped when they could, but even they had limits. This financial pressure was building in the background while I remained completely unaware. 3 months before the incident, I received a promotion that came with a significant salary increase. My parents hosted a celebration dinner, genuinely proud of my achievement. Throughout the evening, I noticed Madison's tight smiles and short responses. When our mother brought out a cake with congratulations written in blue icing, Madison excused herself from the table and didn't return for 20 minutes. When she came back, her eyes were red, but she blamed allergies. The week before everything happened, our family gathered for our monthly Sunday dinner. Madison seemed unusually interested in my health, asking detailed questions about my new medication. "What exactly does it do? How much do you take? What happens if you miss a dose?" At the time, I was touched by her apparent concern. I even showed her my pill organizer and explained my dosage schedule. She held one of the pills, examining its blue coating, before handing it back. "Be careful with those," I joked. "They cost $400 a month, even with insurance." "Wow," she said, raising her eyebrows. So you're literally swallowing money every day. The morning of my collapse, I noticed something slightly off about my pills. The blue coating seemed duller and they felt lighter in my hand. In my rush to prepare for my presentation, I dismissed these observations. That split-second decision nearly cost me my life. The day started like any other. I woke up at 6:30, showered, had breakfast, and took my morning medication with a full glass of water. I had a crucial presentation scheduled at 11, outlining a new investment strategy for one of our biggest clients. I'd been preparing for weeks, and this could mean a substantial bonus if everything went well. By 8 o'clock, I noticed something wasn't right. A slight dizziness came over me as I reviewed my presentation notes. My heart felt fluttery in my chest, a sensation I recognized as an irregular rhythm starting. I checked my pulse, finding it faster than normal, but not dangerously so. I attributed the symptoms to nerves about the presentation and took some deep breaths to calm myself. At 9:30, I arrived at the office and set up in the conference room. The dizziness had intensified, and I was now experiencing cold sweats. Colleagues commented that I looked pale, but I insisted I was fine. Just presentation jitters, I told them. Just stress. By 10:45, as people began filing into the conference room, I was fighting to maintain my composure. My vision occasionally blurred, and I felt a heaviness in my chest that I recognized as a warning sign. I should have called for help then, but the room was filling with executives and important clients. I convinced myself I could get through the hour-long presentation. I managed the first 10 minutes successfully, though I later learned from colleagues that my speech was becoming noticeably slurred. At 12 minutes in, while explaining a graph on the projection screen, the room began to spin. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest, pounding irregularly and rapidly. "Jensen, are you okay?" my manager asked, rising from his seat. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. The room tilted sideways, and then everything went black. I later learned that I collapsed face first onto the conference table, sending water glasses and laptops crashing to the floor. I began convulsing, a seizure triggered by my irregular heartbeat. My colleague Thomas immediately called 911, while our company's safety officer performed CPR until paramedics arrived. The next thing I remember is the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room ceiling. The steady beep of a heart monitor told me I was stable, at least for now. A doctor leaned over me, her expression serious. "Mr. Mitchell, you're in Memorial Hospital. You had a cardiac event. Can you tell me what medications you take?" My mouth was dry, and my voice came out as a croak. I listed my medications and explained my condition. The doctor frowned, making notes on her clipboard. "The paramedics found your medical alert bracelet and emergency contact information. Your family has been notified and should be here soon." Within the hour, my parents rushed into the room, faces pale with worry. Madison trailed behind them, unusually quiet. While my mother fussed over me, adjusting my pillows and asking the nurses countless questions, I noticed Madison hanging back near the door. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dr. Reynolds returned with preliminary test results. "Your heart rhythm is still irregular, but we're getting it under control. Something doesn't add up, though. The symptoms you experienced aren't typical for a missed dose of your medication. I'd like to run a toxicology screen to see what might be in your system." At the mention of a toxicology screen, Madison suddenly spoke up. "Is that really necessary? He probably just forgot to take his meds correctly." I frowned at her. "I never miss my medication, you know that." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. My father cleared his throat and suggested my mother and he get coffee from the cafeteria. As they left, I stared at Madison until she finally met my gaze. "What did you do?" I asked quietly, already knowing something was very wrong. She bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. "It was just supposed to be a joke, Jensen. I didn't think it would be this serious." "What did you do?" I repeated, my voice stronger. "I switched your pills," she whispered. "Just the ones in your morning container. I replaced them with some pills that looked similar. I just wanted you to miss your presentation." She wiped at her eyes. "You're always so perfect, always succeeding at everything despite your heart. I just wanted you to fail at something for once." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own sister had tampered with my life-saving medication for a joke. to make me fail. What pills did you give me, Madison? What exactly did I take this morning? She shook her head frantically. Just some over-the-counter stuff. Sleep aids, I think. And maybe some of Mom's blood pressure pills. They looked kind of the same. I didn't think it would hurt you. Just make you too drowsy for the presentation. Before I could respond, my parents returned. They must have overheard the end of our conversation because my mother's face had drained of color. My father, however, immediately went into damage control mode. "Jensen, we need to talk privately," he said, guiding Madison out into the hallway with my mother. They returned 15 minutes later without Madison. My father closed the door to my hospital room and sat heavily in the chair beside my bed. My mother remained standing, twisting her hands together nervously. "Your sister made a terrible mistake," my father began, "but she never meant to hurt you. She didn't understand what would happen. She switched my heart medication, Dad. She knows exactly what that medication does. We've only talked about it my entire life." "She's going through a rough patch right now," my mother interjected. "She's been struggling with some personal issues." My father leaned forward. "Jensen, we're asking you not to involve the police in this. She's your sister. This would ruin her life." I stared at them in disbelief. She could have ruined my life. Permanently. I could have died in that conference room. "But you didn't," my father said quickly. "You're okay. No permanent damage done." "We're not saying what she did wasn't wrong," my mother added. "She'll get help, we promise. But please don't press charges against your own sister." I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by more than just my medical condition. The people who had always protected me were now asking me to protect someone who had deliberately put my life at risk. "I need time to think," I finally said. "I can't make any decisions right now." They seemed relieved by my non-committal answer, apparently taking it as a sign I might eventually agree. Little did any of us know that the situation was about to become much more serious. The next morning, Dr. Reynolds entered my room with a folder in her hands and a grim expression on her face. My parents and Madison were sitting beside my bed, having arrived early with coffee and breakfast sandwiches in a transparent attempt to butter me up. "I need to speak with Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Reynolds said firmly. "Alone, please." My father started to object, but the doctor cut him off. "This is a private medical matter. I must insist." Reluctantly, my family filed out of the room. Madison glanced back at me, her face a mask of anxiety. Once the door closed, Dr. Reynolds pulled a chair close to my bed and opened the folder. "Mr. Mitchell, the results of your toxicology screen have come back," she said, her voice professional, but with an undercurrent of concern I hadn't heard before. What I found island, deeply troubling. She turned the paper toward me, pointing to highlighted sections of chemical compounds I didn't recognize. Her face had turned noticeably pale. "These aren't just random over-the-counter medications," she explained. "Your system contains a combination of high-dose benzodiazepines, beta blockers, and what appears to be a prescription heart medication that directly interferes with your regular medication." She looked up at me, her expression grave. "This combination is particularly dangerous for someone with your condition. It could cause heart block, severe arrhythmia, respiratory depression, and potentially fatal complications. This wasn't just a harmless prank, Mr. Mitchell. Whoever did this created a potentially lethal cocktail." My mouth went dry. My sister admitted to switching my medication, but she claimed it was just sleep aids and maybe some blood pressure pills. Dr. Reynolds shook her head. "These aren't casual medications someone would have lying around. The benzodiazepines are prescription strength, much higher than any over-the-counter sleep aid. And the particular beta blocker in your system is specifically contraindicated for patients with long QT syndrome. It's literally one of the first medications listed as, 'Do not take for your condition.'" She closed the folder and met my eyes directly. "Mr. Mitchell, as your physician, I have a professional and legal obligation to report suspected intentional poisoning to the authorities. This combination suggests knowledge and intent beyond a simple prank." The room seemed to tilt again, but this time from shock rather than medication effects. "You're saying my sister tried to kill me?" "I'm saying that whoever gave you these medications either knew exactly what they were doing or was criminally negligent. The specific combination found in your system is consistent with what we sometimes see in intentional overdose cases. My mind raced trying to process this information. Madison had always been jealous, resentful, and prone to cruel pranks, but attempted murder. It seemed incomprehensible, yet the evidence was right in front of me. I need some time to think, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Of course, Dr. Reynolds replied, standing. But I should inform you that I've already notified hospital security about the situation, and they've contacted the police as a precautionary measure. An officer will likely want to speak with you today. After she left, I sat in silence for several minutes, trying to make sense of what I'd just learned. My own sister had given me a combination of drugs that could have killed me. Was it possible she didn't know that she had randomly selected pills that happened to form a lethal combination for someone with my condition? The coincidence seemed too great. When I felt steady enough, I asked a nurse to send my family back in. They entered cautiously, my father immediately asking what the doctor had wanted. She showed me the toxicology report, I said, watching their faces carefully. Madison, what exactly did you put in my pill container? My sister fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater. Just what I told you. Some sleep stuff and maybe a few of Mom's pills. I don't remember exactly. The report shows prescription-strength benzodiazepines, beta blockers, and another heart medication that interacts fatally with my regular medication, I said, keeping my voice level. That's not something you'd find in a medicine cabinet. Madison's face drained of color. I don't know what those are. I just grabbed some pills that look similar to yours. From where, Madison? Where did you get prescription medications? My father interrupted. Jensen, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what the toxicology report shows. Dr. Reynolds has already contacted the police. She says this looks like intentional poisoning, not a prank. The room erupted into chaos. Madison burst into tears, my mother gasped and began to deny everything, and my father raised his voice, demanding to speak to the doctor immediately. In the midst of this, a hospital security guard opened the door, likely responding to the commotion. Is everything okay in here? He asked, eyeing my visibly distraught family. No, I said firmly. Everything is not okay. I need my family to leave my room right now. Jensen, you can't be serious, my mother pleaded. We're your family, my father insisted. We need to handle this together. The security guard stepped fully into the room. Sir, the patient has asked you to leave. I need to escort you out. With obvious reluctance, my parents headed for the door. Madison remained frozen, tears streaming down her face. Jensen, please, she whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what those pills would do. Go with Mom and Dad, Madison, I said tiredly. Just go. After they left, I sank back against my pillows, emotionally drained. The security guard asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint against my visitors, but I declined for the moment. I needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. That evening, after the police had taken my initial statement, my father returned alone. He entered my room without knocking, his expression a mixture of anger and desperation. We need to talk, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. This has gotten completely out of hand. Where are Mom and Madison? I asked. I took them home. Madison is distraught. Your mother had to take a sedative. He sat down heavily in the chair beside my bed. Jensen, I understand you're upset, but involving the police is going too far. I didn't involve them. Dr. Reynolds did, because she recognized attempted murder when she saw it. My father flinched at the words, but quickly recovered. That's ridiculous. Your sister made a mistake. A terrible, thoughtless mistake, but she would never try to kill you. He placed the envelope on my bed. $50,000. Cash. To make this go away, say it was a misunderstanding. Tell the police you put the wrong pills in your container yourself. I stared at the envelope then. At my father, a man I had respected my entire life. You're trying to bribe me to cover up what Madison did. He sighed, suddenly looking much older. There's something you don't know, Jensen. Madison has had problems, drug problems. She's been in and out of rehab twice. We kept it from you because of your heart condition. We didn't want to stress you. The pieces began to fall into place. So she had access to these drugs because of her own addiction. She's been clean for 6 months, he said quickly. But yes, she still had contacts, old friends who could get her things. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. If this becomes a police matter with her history, she'll go to prison. Your sister will go to prison, Jensen. Can you live with that? I looked at the envelope again, then back at my father. Can you live with the fact that she nearly killed me? That she might have succeeded if my colleagues hadn't acted so quickly? Of course that's terrible, unforgivable even. But she's family, Jensen. We protect family. You didn't protect me, I said quietly. You're still not protecting me. He stood abruptly, leaving the envelope on the bed. Think about it. For your mother's sake, if not for Madison's. He walked to the door, then paused. We've always supported you, Jensen. Through every doctor's appointment, every hospital stay, every special accommodation. Don't forget that. After he left, I pushed the call button for a nurse. When she arrived, I pointed to the envelope. I need to give this to the police officer who took my statement earlier. It's evidence of attempted bribery. In that moment, I knew I had lost my family. But they had lost me first, the moment they chose Madison's freedom over my life. Detective Amanda Harris arrived the following morning, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd already reviewed the toxicology report and spoken with Dr. Reynolds. Mr. Mitchell, I understand this is difficult, but I need to ask you some specific questions about your sister and your family dynamics, she said, pulling out a small recorder. Do I have your permission to record our conversation? I nodded, and she pressed a button on the device. When did you first notice your medication had been tampered with, she asked. I explained about the slight differences I'd noticed in the pills, but had dismissed in my morning rush. I described Madison's unusual interest in my medication during our family dinner the previous week. I told her about Madison's history of inappropriate pranks and the growing resentment over my recent professional success. And you believe your sister obtained these prescription medications through contacts from her own past drug use? Detective Harris asked, referencing my father's revelation. That's what my father indicated. I wasn't aware of her drug problems until yesterday. She made a note. We'll need to collect the pill container and any remaining medication for evidence. We'll also need access to your phone records and any text messages between you and your sister. The investigation moved quickly. Police obtained a warrant to search Madison's apartment, where they found several prescription bottles without labels. They discovered internet searches on her laptop for drug interactions with long QT syndrome and untraceable poisons. Most damning of all, they found a text conversation with someone named Ryan discussing how Jay's problem will be solved soon and how they would celebrate when the insurance money comes through. I learned I had a life insurance policy I hadn't been aware of, taken out by my parents when I was diagnosed with long QT syndrome. It was intended to cover final expenses if my condition proved fatal. Madison was listed as the primary beneficiary, set to receive $500,000 upon my death. Through all this, the pressure from my family intensified. My parents called constantly, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to threatening. Extended family members I barely spoke to suddenly reached out, urging me to keep this a family matter and consider what this will do to your parents. My mother's sister told me I was killing your mother with stress and asked if that was what I really wanted. The narrative they spread was that Madison had made an innocent mistake, that she had confused medications, that she never intended harm. They painted me as vindictive and unforgiving, willing to destroy my sister's life over a misunderstanding. Some relatives even suggested my medical condition had affected my thinking, that I wasn't remembering events clearly. The isolation would have been unbearable if not for an unexpected ally. Elijah Carter, one of the nurses who had cared for me during my first day in the hospital, became a source of support and encouragement. He had witnessed Madison's confession and my parents' reaction, and he made a point to check on me even after I was no longer assigned to his care. What you're doing takes courage, he told me during one of his visits. Standing up to family is one of the hardest things in the world. Elijah helped me document my ongoing symptoms and provided copies of my hospital records for the investigation. He connected me with a patient advocate who could help navigate the legal aspects of my case. Most importantly, he listened without judgment when I needed to process the overwhelming emotions of betrayal. 3 weeks after my collapse, Detective Harris returned with new information. Madison's boyfriend Ryan had been brought in for questioning and had quickly turned on her to save himself. He claims Madison approached him about finding ways to, and I quote, solve her financial problems permanently, Detective Harris explained. According to Ryan, she specifically asked about medications that would interact badly with your heart condition. He says he helped her research drug interactions but thought it was just talk. He didn't believe she would actually go through with it. Do you believe him? I asked. Not entirely, she admitted. We found text messages where he provided specific instructions on which medications to obtain and how to crush and repackage them to look like your prescription. He's facing charges as an accomplice. The scope of Madison's planning was staggering. This wasn't a spontaneous prank or a moment of jealous impulse. She had researched, prepared, and executed a plan designed to end my life, while making it appear to be a tragic complication of my existing condition. As the evidence mounted, my parents' tactics changed. My father hired Gregory Palmer, one of the most expensive criminal defense attorneys in the state, to represent Madison. Palmer immediately began a campaign to discredit the evidence, suggesting that the police had mishandled the toxicology samples and that Madison's internet searches were taken out of context. The story leaked to local media, generating public interest and support. While my parents tried to keep Madison's name out of the press, mine was fair game. I received messages of support from strangers who were horrified by what had happened to me, but also threatening messages from people who believed I was destroying my family over a misunderstanding. My health suffered under the stress. I developed insomnia and anxiety, my heart rhythm becoming erratic enough that Dr. Reynolds recommended I take a leave of absence from work. The company was understanding, having witnessed my collapse firsthand, but the financial strain added to my worries. The medical bills were mounting, and although insurance covered most expenses, the deductibles and copays were substantial. Through it all, the question that haunted me was simple. How could my sister hate me enough to want me dead? We had our differences and rivalries, but I had never imagined her capable of this level of malice. Had the signs been there all along? Had I been blind to the depth of her resentment? These questions led to a breaking point when my parents arranged what they called a family meeting at their home. They promised it would just be the four of us, a chance to talk things through before the situation progressed further. Desperate for answers, and perhaps for reconciliation, I agreed to attend. I should have known better. When I arrived, I found not just my parents and Madison, but a dozen extended family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Even my elderly grandmother had been brought in for what was clearly an intervention. Not for Madison, the would-be murderer, but for me, the victim who refused to quietly forgive and forget. We're here because we love you, Jensen. My mother began, her voice quavering. We want our family to heal. What followed was 2 hours of coordinated emotional manipulation. Madison performed a tearful apology, claiming she had been in a dark place and wasn't thinking clearly. She insisted she never meant to hurt me, just to make me miss my presentation. My relatives took turns explaining how family forgiveness was a virtue, how pressing charges would only create more pain, how I needed to be the bigger person. Through it all, I remained silent, letting them exhaust their prepared speeches. When they finally finished, expectant eyes turned to me, waiting for my capitulation. Is that all? I asked quietly. Jensen, my father said warningly. No, I want to be sure everyone has had their say. I looked around the room. Because now I'll have mine. I stood addressing the assembled family. Madison didn't make a mistake. She didn't accidentally grab the wrong pills. She researched which medications would interact fatally with my heart condition. She acquired those specific drugs. She carefully replaced my life-saving medication with a combination designed to kill me. Protests erupted, but I raised my voice over them. The police have the evidence. Internet searches, text messages planning my death, discussions about collecting my life insurance. I turned to my parents, and instead of being horrified that one of your children tried to murder the other, you've done everything possible to protect her and pressure me. My father stood now too, his face red with anger. We've done everything for you, your entire life, Jensen. Everything. And this is how you repay us, by trying to send your sister to prison. She tried to kill me, Dad. She nearly succeeded. If you go through with this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are no longer our son. Do you understand? You will be dead to this family." The room fell silent. My mother let out a small sob. Madison stared at the floor. I looked at my father, a man who had coached my little league teams, who had sat by my hospital bed through countless scares, who had taught me to drive and helped me move into my first apartment. "I was already dead to this family," I said finally. "The moment you chose Madison over me, the moment you decided her freedom was worth more than my life, I was already gone." I walked out of that house knowing I would never return. The family I had known and loved was gone, replaced by strangers who valued appearances over truth and loyalty over justice. I was entirely alone. Or so I thought. When I reached my car, I found I couldn't drive. My hands were shaking too badly to grip the steering wheel. I called the only person I could think of. Elijah arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at my face, and simply said, "Let me drive you home." That night, sitting in my apartment with a cup of tea, Elijah had insisted on making I reach the lowest point of my crisis. Not just physically ill, but emotionally devastated. I questioned everything about my childhood, wondering if my parents had ever truly loved me, or if I had always been a burden they resented. I wondered if there was something fundamentally unlovable about me that had made my sister hate me enough to want me dead. "You know this isn't about you, right?" Elijah said, interrupting my spiral of self-doubt. "This is about them, their choices, their failures, not yours." It was the first step in a long journey back to myself. Not the self that existed in relation to my family, but the person I was independent of them. The person I could become without their expectations and limitations. 2 days after the disastrous family intervention, District Attorney Sophia Lawson called to inform me they were charging Madison with attempted murder in the first degree. Ryan faced charges as an accomplice. My parents would be investigated for obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence based on text messages suggesting they had helped Madison clean her apartment before the police search. "Given the evidence, we have a strong case," District Attorney Lawson explained. "But I want to prepare you. This will be a difficult process. Your family has hired a very aggressive defense attorney who will likely try to paint you as unstable or vindictive." "I understand," I said, though the prospect of having my character assassinated in court was daunting. "There's also likely to be media attention. Cases involving family members, especially with attempted murder charges, tend to attract public interest." She wasn't wrong. The following day, a local news station ran a story about the case, complete with photos of Madison looking young and vulnerable next to an unflattering image of me leaving the hospital. The reporter emphasized the family tragedy angle, noting Madison's previously unblemished record and my history of medical issues. My phone rang constantly with calls from reporters seeking comments. I declined them all, following District Attorney Lawson's advice to avoid making public statements that could complicate the case. My parents had no such reservations. They gave a tearful interview claiming Madison had been misunderstood and that I was exaggerating the situation due to emotional instability caused by medication side effects. The stress took a physical toll. My heart rhythm became so erratic that Dr. Reynolds insisted I wear a portable heart monitor. I developed migraines and stomach problems. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. Work became impossible, and I requested an extended leave of absence, further straining my finances. Elijah continued to be my strongest support, checking on me daily, and sometimes bringing dinner when I was too exhausted to cook. Through him, I connected with a support group for victims of family violence, where I met others who understood the particular pain of betrayal by those who should have protected you. As the pre-trial proceedings began, more disturbing information emerged. The prosecution discovered that Madison had made 3 previous attempts to tamper with my medication, gradually increasing the dosage of dangerous substances. This explained several minor episodes I had experienced in the months before my collapse incidents I had attributed to stress or changes in my condition. Even more shocking were the old medical records Detective Harris uncovered. Throughout my childhood and teen years, there had been multiple unexplained worsening of my symptoms, always when Madison was present, and often when she had been left to watch me or bring me food or drinks. Incidents that had been dismissed as the natural progression of my condition now appeared in a sinister new light. We believe your sister may have been harming you for years, Detective Harris told me gently. There's a psychological condition called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a caregiver induces illness in someone under their care for attention or sympathy. In children, it often manifests as harming siblings who already have medical conditions. Are you saying Madison has been trying to kill me since we were kids? The thought was almost too horrible to comprehend. Not necessarily kill you, but make you sicker, yes. Your parents' statements about her being jealous of the attention your condition received support this theory. Further investigation revealed disturbing patterns in Madison's past. A childhood pet had died mysteriously after Madison had been scolded for poor grades. A roommate in college had suffered unexplained arsenic poisoning that was attributed to contaminated well water. Madison's ex-boyfriend had been hospitalized with symptoms similar to mine just before their breakup. My parents, confronted with this evidence, doubled down on their defense of Madison. They insisted these were coincidences or misunderstandings. They hired a psychiatrist who, without ever examining Madison, provided a statement suggesting she suffered from undiagnosed mental health issues that impaired her judgment. The implication was clear: Madison wasn't responsible for her actions and needed treatment, not punishment. The pressure campaign against me intensified. Anonymous packages arrived at my apartment containing childhood photos, cards I had made for my parents' family vacation mementos. The message was clear: remember these good times. Remember your loyalty. Drop the charges. When these tactics failed, the approach turned nastier. Rumors spread among extended family that I had always been jealous of Madison, that I was exaggerating what happened for attention, that I was mentally unstable. My father's threat to disown me became reality when I received legal documents showing I had been removed from my parents' will. A letter from their attorney informed me I was no longer welcome at family properties and should arrange to collect any personal belongings I had stored at their home. The final blow came when my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, arrived unannounced at my apartment. I had always been close to her, spending summers at her lake house and confiding in her about struggles with my condition. I let her in, hoping perhaps one family member might be on my side. Your mother hasn't slept through the night since this started, she began without preamble. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Is this really what you want? To destroy everyone who loves you? They're defending someone who tried to kill me, Aunt Patricia. Multiple times, apparently. She waved this away. Madison needs help, not prison. And your parents are just trying to protect their daughter. I'm their child, too, I said quietly. Yes, but you've always been stronger than Madison, more independent. You can handle this. She reached for my hand. Imagine what prison would do to her. She wouldn't survive it. But you can survive this pain and move on. You can be the hero here, Jensen. I withdrew my hand. By letting her get away with attempted murder, by understanding that family sometimes requires sacrifice, she countered. Your parents have sacrificed everything for your condition. Now it's your turn to give something back. Her words clarified everything. In my family's eyes, I had always been a burden. My medical needs had been met not out of love but obligation. Now that the obligation ran in the other direction, I was expected to sacrifice my justice, my safety, perhaps even my life for the family good. I think you should leave, I said. Jensen, be reasonable. Get out of my apartment, Aunt Patricia, and tell my parents not to send anyone else. I'm done. After she left, I called Elijah. I need to get out of this apartment. Out of this city, maybe. Where do you want to go? He asked without hesitation. Anywhere they can't find me. That weekend, Elijah helped me pack essential belongings into his car. I arranged with my building manager to continue paying rent remotely, but I needed physical and emotional distance from the constant pressure and surveillance. We drove 3 hours to a small rental cabin Elijah's family owned in the mountains, a place with no internet and spotty cell service but peaceful isolation. For 2 weeks I recovered physically and began to heal emotionally. The distance gave me perspective. I realized I had spent my entire life trying to earn the unconditional love that should have been freely given. I had accepted scraps of affection and convinced myself it was a feast. I had allowed my sister's jealousy to be my problem, to manage rather than my parents' responsibility to address. When I returned to the city, it was with a resolve that couldn't be shaken. I met with District Attorney Lawson and confirmed I wanted to proceed with all charges. I arranged for a restraining order against my parents and Madison. I changed my phone number and email address, closing off the constant barrage of manipulation. Most importantly, I stopped questioning whether I deserved better treatment. I knew I did. Everyone does. The trial began 4 months after my collapse. By then, I had moved to a new apartment, started therapy, and slowly begun rebuilding my life. My health had stabilized, though Dr. Reynolds warned that the emotional trauma had likely caused lasting impact on my heart condition. Madison entered the courtroom in a conservative blue dress hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail, the picture of an innocent young woman, wrongly accused. My parents sat directly behind her, my mother clutching a handkerchief, my father's face set in stone. They did not look at me. I testified on the second day, providing a detailed account of the events leading to my hospitalization. Madison's attorney, Gregory Palmer, spent hours trying to undermine my credibility, suggesting my memory was compromised by my medical condition and medications. "Isn't it possible, Mr. Mitchell, that you misunderstood your sister's actions?" Palmer asked. "That perhaps you accidentally mixed up your own medications and are now blaming her due to long-standing sibling rivalry?" "No," I replied firmly. "I never mix up my medications. My life depends on taking them correctly." "But you admit you noticed something different about the pills that morning, and took them anyway." "I noticed subtle differences that I attributed to a change in manufacturing. I had no reason to suspect someone had deliberately replaced my life-saving medication with a potentially lethal combination." "Someone," Palmer repeated. "But you can't be certain it was Madison, can you? She admitted it to me in the hospital room. She said it was a joke that she wanted me to miss my presentation." Palmer paced before the jury. "A joke, not attempted murder. Isn't it possible you've blown this out of proportion, Mr. Mitchell? That your sister made a thoughtless but not malicious mistake? The toxicology report showed a specific combination of drugs known to be lethal for someone with my condition. That's not a mistake, that's planning." As the trial progressed, the prosecution built a methodical case. Medical experts testified that the combination of drugs found in my system would likely have been fatal without prompt medical intervention. Digital forensics experts presented Madison's internet search history, showing research into drug interactions with long QT syndrome and methods to make deaths appear natural. Ryan testified as part of a plea deal describing how Madison had approached him about finding ways to solve her financial problems permanently. He admitted helping her research which medications would cause a fatal reaction with my heart condition. She was specific about wanting something that would look like a natural complication, Ryan testified. Something that wouldn't raise suspicions because of his existing condition. The most damning evidence came from Madison's own text messages. In conversations with Ryan, she discussed the life insurance policy complained about my perfect life, despite being defective, and outlined a timeline for what she called the solution. 3 weeks into the trial, the prosecution called Dr. Sarah Bennett, a pediatric cardiologist who had treated me from ages 8 to 18. She brought medical records showing patterns that had gone unnoticed at the time. Looking back at Jensen's records, we can see multiple instances where his condition worsened dramatically, without clear medical explanation, Dr. Bennett testified. These episodes typically occurred after he had been alone with his sister, or after consuming food or beverages she had access to. "Are you suggesting these weren't natural fluctuations in his condition?" the prosecutor asked. "These patterns are consistent with what we now recognize as medical child abuse, formerly called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The sudden spikes in symptoms, the lack of medical explanation, the presence of a specific individual before each episode. If we had recognized these patterns, then we would have involved Child Protective Services." My mother gasped audibly from the gallery. My father's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the bench. The final witness was Madison's former roommate, Lucia Diaz, who had been hospitalized with arsenic poisoning 3 years earlier. She testified that Madison had prepared most of their meals and had been unusually attentive during her illness, even insisting on staying in the hospital room overnight. "The doctors never determined how I was exposed to arsenic," Lucia testified. They assumed it was contaminated well water at our apartment complex, but after I recovered, I moved out immediately. Something felt wrong about the whole situation, but I couldn't prove anything. When the defense presented their case, they focused primarily on Madison's mental state, bringing in a psychiatrist who had evaluated her after her arrest. Dr. Marcus Fuller testified that Madison suffered from borderline personality disorder and narcissistic tendencies that impaired her judgment and ability to feel empathy. Madison experiences emotions differently than most people, Dr. Fuller explained. She has difficulty understanding the consequences of her actions and often feels intense jealousy and abandonment fears that can trigger impulsive behavior. On cross-examination, however, the prosecution established that personality disorders did not prevent Madison from understanding right from wrong or planning complex actions. Would someone with borderline personality disorder understand that tampering with heart medication could cause death, the prosecutor asked. Yes, Dr. Fuller admitted. They would understand the concept even if they might not fully process the emotional reality of those consequences. The defense called character witnesses former teachers and friends who described Madison as kind and generous. They presented an alternative narrative where Madison, struggling with undiagnosed mental illness and financial problems, had made a terrible mistake without understanding the consequences. My parents both testified, describing Madison as a troubled but loving daughter who had always lived in the shadow of a chronically ill brother. They portrayed our family dynamic as challenging but ultimately loving with everyone, making sacrifices for the greater good. We always tried to treat our children equally, my mother testified tearfully. But Jensen's condition required extra attention, extra care. Madison sometimes felt left out, and perhaps that created resentment over time. But she would never deliberately harm her brother. Never. When my father took the stand, he spoke directly to the jury, his voice steady and authoritative. Our family has been torn apart by these accusations. Madison made a thoughtless mistake, yes, but she's not a murderer. She's a young woman who needs help, not punishment. Neither of them looked at me once during their testimony. In closing arguments, the prosecution emphasized the premeditation evident in Madison's actions. This was not a prank gone wrong, the prosecutor told the jury. This was a carefully planned attempt to kill Jensen Mitchell and make it appear to be a natural death from his existing condition. The defendant researched lethal drug interactions, obtained specific medications, and replaced her brother's life-saving pills with a deadly combination. She discussed her plans with her boyfriend and anticipated collecting life insurance money. These are the actions of someone who intended to commit murder. The defense made a final appeal to sympathy. Madison Mitchell is a troubled young woman who made a terrible mistake, Palmer argued. She never intended to cause serious harm to her brother. She's not a calculating killer, but a person in need of mental health treatment. Sending her to prison won't serve justice. It will only compound this family tragedy. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict, guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. As the foreman read the decision, Madison collapsed into sobs. My mother cried out and had to be supported by my father, whose face had finally cracked to reveal raw, undisguised fury directed at me. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, only a profound sadness for what might have been for the family I had thought I had for the sister who had wanted me dead. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, remanding Madison to custody. As she was led away, she turned to look at me for the first time during the entire trial. Her expression wasn't of remorse or even anger, but something closer to confusion, as if she still couldn't understand why her actions had led to this moment. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about my reaction to the verdict. I declined to comment, focusing instead on making my way through the crowd to where Elijah waited. He had attended every day of the trial, a steady, supportive presence in a sea of hostility. "It's over," he said, simply taking my arm to guide me through the throng. But it wasn't over, not really. The trial had ended, but the aftermath was just beginning. My family was irreparably shattered. My sister faced years in prison. My parents would likely face their own legal consequences for obstruction. And I had to find a way to build a life from the ashes of everything I had believed about my past. In the 6 months following Madison's sentencing to 20 years in prison with possibility of parole after 12, I embarked on the most difficult journey of my life, not fighting a physical illness which I had experience with, but healing from the invisible wounds of betrayal and abandonment. The first weeks were the hardest. I moved through my days in a fog, going through the motions of existence without fully participating. I returned to work but requested a transfer to a different department where I wouldn't have to face the colleagues who had witnessed my collapse. I avoided social gatherings and ignored messages from acquaintances curious about the family drama they'd seen in the news. My parents faced misdemeanor charges for obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence. They accepted a plea deal that included probation and community service, avoiding jail time but acquiring criminal records. They sold the family home and moved 3 states away, presumably to escape the notoriety the case had brought. They made no attempt to contact me before leaving. Madison began sending letters from prison almost immediately. The first few expressed rage, blaming me for destroying her life. Later, ones shifted to manipulation, reminiscing about childhood memories and asking if I really wanted my only sister to waste her youth behind bars. I read each one searching for some acknowledgement of the harm she had caused, some genuine remorse that might help me make sense of what had happened. I never found it. Therapy became my lifeline. Dr. Rachel Wilson specialized in family trauma and betrayal, and she helped me understand that my family's dysfunction went far deeper than I had realized. What you're describing suggests patterns that were established long before Madison's final attempt on your life, Dr. Wilson explained during one session. The family system was organized around denying problems rather than addressing them. Your parents enabled Madison's behavior because acknowledging the truth would have required them to take responsibility. But why, I asked? Why choose her over me, especially when the evidence was so clear? Sometimes parents identify more strongly with one child, often the one who most reflects their own unresolved issues. From what you've described, your parents saw themselves as victims of circumstance, just as Madison portrayed herself. You, with your resilience and determination despite your health challenges, represented something they couldn't face about their own choices. These insights didn't erase the pain, but they helped me stop searching for a logical explanation that would never come. My family's choices weren't about me. They reflected their own limitations, their own brokenness. Support came from unexpected places. The support group for family violence victims became a surrogate family of sorts. These strangers who had experienced similar betrayals understood what many others couldn't. They didn't ask why I couldn't just forgive and move on. They recognized the profound rupture that occurs when those meant to love you cause deliberate harm. Elijah remained a constant presence, his friendship gradually evolving into something deeper. He understood my hesitation to trust my fear of vulnerability. He gave me space when I needed it, and steady companionship when isolation became too heavy. 6 months after the trial, we acknowledged what had been growing between us and began dating cautiously, mindfully. "I'm pretty damaged goods," I warned him one evening. "We all are in some way," he replied. "Some damage is just more visible than others." My health improved as the stress of the trial and family pressure subsided. Dr. Reynolds adjusted my medication, and the portable heart monitor eventually became unnecessary. I still had a chronic condition that required management, but the mysterious flare-ups that had plagued me throughout childhood never recurred. The revelation that many of those episodes had likely been induced by Madison was simultaneously validating and horrifying. 1 year after my collapse, I received a letter from the prison chaplain who worked with Madison. He requested a meeting, saying Madison had been participating in therapy and had expressed desire to make amends. After considerable reflection and discussion with Dr. Wilson, I agreed to visit the prison. Madison looked smaller somehow, her prison uniform hanging loosely on her frame. The confident, vibrant sister I remembered seemed diminished, though her eyes still held that familiar intensity. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice surprisingly formal. "The chaplain said you wanted to talk," I replied, keeping my own voice neutral. What followed wasn't the heartfelt apology I might have hoped for, but it was perhaps more honest. Madison acknowledged what she had done without excuses about mental illness or misunderstandings. She couldn't explain why she had targeted me specifically, only that her resentment had built over years, until it crystallized into a conviction that her life would improve if I were gone. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said at the end of our conversation. "I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm sorry for whatever that's worth." It wasn't closure exactly. The damage was too extensive, the betrayal too profound for such a neat resolution, but it was something, an acknowledgement of reality, if nothing else. 2 weeks later, I visited my parents in their new home. The meeting was even more difficult than the one with Madison. Unlike her, they remained entrenched in denial, insisting they had only ever tried to protect both their children. "We lost everything because of this," my father said bitterly. "Our reputation, our savings, our daughter's future. I almost lost my life." I reminded him quietly. "That was never going to happen," my mother insisted. "Madison wouldn't have gone through with it. She was just acting out." I realized then that they would never acknowledge the truth. Their reality was too firmly constructed around their self-image as good parents caught in impossible circumstances. Accepting Madison's true intentions and their own role in enabling her would require a complete dismantling of that identity. I left, knowing it was the last time I would see them, not because of anger or resentment, but because there was no authentic relationship possible with people who could not or would not recognize reality. The parents I had loved existed primarily in my childhood memories, not in these strangers who had chosen comfortable lies over painful truth. 18 months after my collapse, I moved to a new city accepting a job offer that represented both professional advancement and a fresh start. Elijah applied for positions at nearby hospitals and joined me 3 months later. We found an apartment with large windows and filled it with plants and books and light. My new cardiologist, Dr. Chen, was impressed with how well I managed my condition. Many patients with long QT syndrome struggle with the psychological aspects of a chronic heart condition, he observed during our first appointment. "You seem to have developed remarkable resilience." "I've had a lot of practice," I told him, thinking not just of my physical health challenges, but the emotional ones as well. The distance provided perspective. I could see now how my family's dysfunction had shaped me, but also how it had failed to define me. I had survived not just Madison's attempt on my life, but years of subtle undermining gaslighting and emotional manipulation. That survival wasn't just luck or medical intervention. It was a testament to something within me that had always recognized my own worth, even when those who should have valued me most did not. Life isn't perfect now. I still have days when grief ambushes me, when I mourn the family I thought I had, and the sister who might have been my friend rather than my would-be murderer. I still manage a chronic health condition that requires daily attention and occasional medical interventions. But these challenges exist alongside joy, purpose, and genuine connection. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by love in action. It's found in friends who show up consistently, and partners who see your vulnerabilities as areas to protect rather than exploit, in communities built on mutual support rather than obligation and guilt. My chosen family might be smaller than my biological one, but it's built on a foundation of truth and respect rather than denial and manipulation. The most profound lesson from this experience is that we can't control how others treat us, but we can decide what treatment we're willing to accept. For too long, I accepted scraps of conditional love because I feared the alternative of no love at all. I now understand that healthy relationships aren't about convincing others of your worth. They're about connecting with people who already recognize it. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your own experience, know that you deserve better than betrayal disguised as love. Healthy families don't ask members to sacrifice their safety, dignity, or truth to maintain appearances. Real love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller or deny your reality. Have you ever had to choose between truth and family loyalty? What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important personal experiences. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we build is more healing than the one we're born into.